Not all dreams are meant to come true. Some never even get the chance. A voice that never cried. A heartbeat that never got to race with joy. A promise left unfulfilled before it ever had a name. But what if that soul had something to say? What if the unborn had a dream? Not to be famous. Not to change the world. Just to meet the ones who made it. This is the story of a dream that never made it to morning. They say life begins at birth. But that's not true. Life begins in silence. A flicker. A spark. A rhythm forming quietly inside a mother's womb. Before there were words. Before there were memories. There was hope. And that hope had a heartbeat. But not every heartbeat gets heard. Some are silenced. Not by hate, but by fear. Not by cruelty, but by confusion. And yet, if that tiny voice could speak, it wouldn't scream. It wouldn't blame. It would whisper, "I only wanted to meet you." A promise isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's felt, like the first time a mother finds out she's expecting. There's no contract, no vow, but something shifts. A soul is entrusted, and though the child cannot speak, it already believes in that silent promise. You'll be there for me. You'll meet me. You'll hold me. But life has a strange way of rewriting plans. Dreams get delayed. Fear speaks louder than faith. And what was once a promise becomes a decision. A decision made in a quiet clinic, behind closed eyes and trembling hands. Sometimes a whisper echoes longer than a shout. Sarah was 22 when she made the decision. College. No support. Parents didn't know. She told herself it was just a procedure. 2 weeks later, she had a dream. In that dream, a little boy with her eyes and her father's laugh walked away from her in a field. He didn't speak. He just turned around once and smiled. 15 years later, she still remembers that smile. Not with anger, but with an ache that words can't explain. And then there's Daniel. He was never told. She made the choice alone. He found out through a mutual friend. Years after, he cried in the parking lot of a grocery store. Not because he wanted a baby back then, but because he never got the chance to say, "I would have stayed. I would have tried. I would have loved them." Real stories. Real people. Real dreams that didn't get to grow up. If that fetus had a voice, it wouldn't ask for much. Not toys. Not birthdays. Not a future mansion with a dog named Lucky. Not even a name written in cursive on a baby blanket. Just a moment. A moment to be seen. To be felt. To be real, even for a breath. I wanted to look into your eyes. Even if it was only for a second. I wanted to feel your arms. Even if I never remembered the warmth. I wanted to exist in your world, even if only for a day. I didn't want to be a burden. I only wanted to belong. No expectations. No demands. Just the quiet hope of a first hello. This isn't a story to cause guilt. It's not a sermon. It's not judgment. It's a reflection. It's a pause. It's a question. What do we do with the lives we never lived? And how do we honor the voices we never got to hear? Regret isn't always slamming doors or screaming at the sky. Sometimes it's soft. So soft you almost miss it. A birthday that doesn't feel complete, but no one knows why. An empty seat at the dinner table. One no one else notices. But they do. Every single time. Sometimes it's the way a woman walks past a stroller, and her eyes glaze over. Or how a man pauses outside a baby store, then quickly looks away, like the sight alone is too heavy to carry. Regret isn't always a breakdown. Sometimes it's a quiet sigh in the dark, a long pause before sleep, the invisible lump in the throat when someone says, "Do you have kids?" They don't cry. They don't scream. They just remember the promise they couldn't keep, the future they once imagined, the dream they once carried inside them, and let go of, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how much they would. But here's the part no one talks about. The unborn didn't dream of college degrees or wedding days. They didn't care about medals, promotions, or praise. They didn't want to be perfect. They just wanted to be real. They weren't asking for a future. They were only hoping for a beginning. Not a lifetime. Just a heartbeat's worth of love. Not applause. Just a glance of recognition. A whisper of belonging. They didn't crave achievements or approval. They weren't counting milestones. They were counting seconds, hoping for one. With you. Even if I never got a name. Even if I never got to breathe air. Even if my life was only weeks long, I would have smiled if I could have, just to see you once. Just to know I mattered, even for a moment. Just to feel wanted before I disappeared. That was the dream. Simple, quiet, holy. And for many, it went unfulfilled, but never unimagined. So what now? What do you do with a promise that was broken before it could bloom? You honor it, not by drowning in shame, but by letting it open your heart in ways it couldn't before. You don't need to speak their name to remember them. You don't need to hold them to love them. You just need to let their short, silent life shape yours. Let the ache soften your edges. Let the memory sharpen your empathy. Let what could have been guide what still can be. Be kinder. Be braver. Be softer with the ones who trust you, and wiser with the choices that hold weight. Because the promise wasn't just to them. It was to yourself. That you would become the kind of person who protects what's fragile, who nurtures what's growing, who chooses love over fear, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. This message is for the parents who never got to be. You were scared. You were young. You were unsure. You didn't know how to carry the weight. You didn't feel ready to hold a future you couldn't yet picture. And maybe you made a choice that still whispers to you at night. Maybe there are days it hurts in ways you can't explain. Not because you're heartless, but because you cared more than anyone knew. But that doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean you don't deserve peace, or grace, or the quiet kind of healing that comes without judgment. You see, the dream didn't die. It changed forms. It lives now in how gently you speak, in how deeply you feel, in the softness behind your strength. That child, that spark, that almost life, it became part of your story. And stories don't end with one chapter. They continue. And maybe, just maybe, your next chapter will be the one where you forgive yourself and finally learn to love the version of you that had to make an impossible choice. You may not be able to go back, but you can go forward, differently. Not in shame, not in guilt, but in deeper awareness, in softer strength. You can become the kind of person who holds space for pain without turning away. You can be a shelter for others and for yourself. You can be the voice that says, "It's okay. I'm here. I'll listen." You don't have to carry this alone. You can teach others what it truly means to value life. Not just the life outside of us, but the one growing quietly within, in our hearts, our minds, our choices. The next time you're faced with a moment of decision, pause, feel, breathe. Remember this story. and ask yourself, is this the kind of love I'd want to receive? Is this the kind of legacy I'd want to leave behind? Because sometimes the smallest lives, the ones the world never got to meet, still leave behind the biggest lessons, not in words, but in the way we choose to live afterward. And maybe, just maybe, that's how their dream finally comes true. Some souls never reach the world, but they still teach us how to love deeper, softer, and with more courage.